Okay, hello everyone. Today I will review factoring with you, factoring day one, and then we'll have a day two tomorrow on factoring as well. Um, Need to recall what you should have learned in algebra. This comes right out of our textbook, Algebra 2, page 331, and it says connecting algebra to previous courses. I always question that when I teach this lesson because I realize I end up having to spend almost a week just reviewing factoring because it seems like students have forgotten this. I don't know if they teach much factoring in Algebra 1 now, so I think it's pretty much all linear. So in any case here, we're going to have to learn how to factor, which is really important. So initially, we'll begin factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, trinomial meaning three terms, okay? Three terms. And so we have something called monomials, which is like one term, like 3x or negative 7x to the fourth. That would be a monomial. And then we have binomials. That would be like 3 or 2x plus 1 or 3x squared minus 2. So this would be called a binomial because we have two terms. And then we have a monomial, meaning we have three terms, x squared minus 3x minus 10. Okay, so what do we do when we factor? Well, when we factor a trinomial, we want to find factors of the trinomial that will give us two binomials that when multiplied give us the trinomial. And let me explain here. So to recall, I wonder how many of you remember the FOIL method, first outside, inside, last. FOIL, if you remember that. Do you remember how to FOIL? If there's one thing that students seem to remember when they leave high school mathematics, and that is they remember how to FOIL. So how do you FOIL? Well, you have two binomials, okay? You have an x plus 4 binomial, meaning two terms. One term is x, the other term is 4. And then you have another binomial, an x plus 5, okay? So you're going to multiply two binomials. And so what you do, to recall FOIL, you multiply the first terms, x times x, and that gives you x squared. And then you multiply the outside terms, x times 5, and that will give you 5x. And then you multiply the inside terms, 4 times x, that will give you 4x. And then you multiply the last terms, 4 times 5, and that will give you 20. And then you combine your like terms, and then in the end you'll get your x squared plus 9x plus 20. Okay. But factoring is the opposite of FOILing or multiplying. You see, when I FOILed, I went from two binomials to a trinomial. That was multiplying. But then in factoring, you go from a trinomial to a product of two binomials. Okay, so you're trying to find two numbers, if you will, that add up to the given expression. So for example, if I said what are factors of 15, and you would say like, if I said what are factors of 15 that add up to 8, factors of 15 to add up to 8, well, that would be 3 and 5, because 3 times 5 equals 15, and 3 plus 5 equals 8. All right, and so we'll be finding factors of a number, but we're actually finding factors of an algebraic expression. That algebraic expression is x squared plus 9x plus 20. We're finding two binomials that will multiply to gives us that x squared plus 9x plus 20. All right, so when we factor trinomials, we have to remember FOIL in reverse. Okay? It's like FOILing in reverse. Now, so you have to remember the FOIL method, I always say. And then the next thing, you have to know your multiplication facts, right? I mean, there's just no way around this, okay? You need to be good with your multiplication facts. So for example, if I said, what are factors of 8 that add to 6? Factors of 8 that add to 6. Well, you say, well, that's 2 and 4, because 2 plus 4 is equal to 6, and 2 times 4 is 8. If I say, what are factors of negative 12 that add to negative 1? Well, you would say negative 4 and 3, because negative 4 plus 3 equals negative 1. And then lastly, if I said what are factors of 20 that adds to 9, or negative 9, you would say, well, negative 4 and negative 5. Negative 4 and negative 5, because negative 4 plus negative 5 equals negative 9. Okay, so to factor and factor very well, I mean, there's just no way around it. You have to be very good with your multiplication facts, and then you have to remember the FOIL method. So let's look at some examples here. What happens if I said, okay, find two binomials when multiplied gives you x squared minus x minus 12. So the way you begin, again, you begin with the multiplication facts, and it'd be helpful sometimes to make your multiplication table for negative 12. I could have a negative 1, and 12 when multiplied gives you negative 12. But if I add them, I get 11, and I don't have 11. I want a negative 1. I can go 1 and negative 12, but again, I'll still get negative 12, but when I add them, I'll get a negative 11. I want a negative 1. I can go 2 and negative 6. When I multiply, I get a negative 12, but when I add, I get a negative 4. That doesn't work. I can go negative 2 and 6. Well, that would give me 4 when I add. I can go 3 and negative 4, and that does it. So 3 and negative 4, okay, when added gives you your negative 1. So those are the factors of negative 12 that add up to negative 1. So the way we would factor this trinomial into the product of two binomials, well, we tell students draw your brackets first, put your x first. X times x gives you x squared. Remember, you're folding in reverse. Okay? And then your factors then will be positive 3 and a negative 4. Positive 3 and a negative 4. You see it works. So and again, you could check if you FOIL, x times x is x squared. X times a negative 4 is a negative 4x. 3 times x is positive 3x. And then 3 times a negative 4 is a negative 12. And you do get x squared minus x minus 12. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Okay, what are factors of x squared plus 9x plus 14? And again, you can list all the factors 1 and 14. Well, certainly 1 and 14 doesn't add up to 9. And then 2 and 7 does, however. So factors of a positive 14 that add up to positive 9 are 2 and 7. 2 and 7. When this term is positive, the C term is positive here. There's only two ways you can get a positive when you multiply. You have a positive times a positive equals a positive, or you'll have a negative times a negative equals positive. In this case, it was a positive times a positive. And how do I know that? Because that's positive. We'll look at the next case where it will be a negative times a negative. So let's do that. The next example here, I have x squared minus 5x plus 4. Okay, so again, the only way I can get a positive is a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. In this case, it's going to be a negative times a negative. And how do I know that? Because that's negative. So positive factors of a positive 4 that add up to negative 5 will be negative 4 and negative 1. Negative 1, negative 4. So that's what I have. So those are my two binomials. X minus 1 times x minus 4. Okay, x minus 1 times x minus 4, 2 and 2. Or 2 and 7, 2 and 7. Negative 1, negative 4. Negative 1, negative 4. Next one here. So x squared plus 3x minus 10. So again, I'd say, what are factors of negative 10 that add up to 3? Well, that's a negative 5, or negative 2 and a positive 5. Negative 2 and a positive 5. Negative 2 plus positive 5 gives you a positive 3, and that's what you want. So when I factor that, that's x minus 2 times x plus 5. All right. So in general, when you're working with trinomials and you're factoring trinomials, you're trying to find factors of the C term that add up to the B term in the simple case. And when I say the simple case, I mean when A is equal to 1. Okay. Very easy. The simple case, you find factors of the C term that add up to the B term. When A is not equal to 1, then you have to find factors of the A and C term that add up to the B term. A little more difficult. All right, so that's a quick review of factoring easy trinomials when A is equal to 1. We'll do a little more difficult ones tomorrow. Now let's look at factoring binomials. Okay, so recall binomial is two terms. So we have a 2x squared and a negative 18x or minus 18x. So how do we factor binomials? Well, before I do that, let's say here we were multiplying a monomial 2x times a binomial x minus 9. So we had a monomial 2x and we were multiplying it by a binomial x minus 9. Well, what you would do, you'd multiply, you distribute 2x times x is 2x squared, and then 2x times a negative 9 will give you negative 18x. Now, when you factor, like I said, factoring is the opposite of dividing. Okay, or distributing. Factoring is the opposite of distributing. So when we go to factor this here, what we're looking for, we say we're looking for the greatest monomial factors. Like I'm the greatest in the world. Greatest monomial factor. Monomial. Mr. Winston can't spell monomial. So we're looking for the greatest monomial factor. The GMF. The GMF. Oh, come on. Okay, so what is the greatest monomial factor? Well, the greatest monomial factor of a binomial is that monomial factor that divides evenly into both terms. So let me explain here. So I have a 2x squared minus an 18x. All right. 2x squared minus 18x. Remember, again, factoring is the opposite of dividing. Or factoring is the opposite of multiplying, so I'll be dividing here. So, all right, so what I want to do is I want to divide 2x squared and 18x by something by something. So what is that something? Well, when I work with the numbers 2, the largest number that divides evenly into 2 and 18 is 2. Okay. Well, that was easy. And then when you're working with the variables here, the x squared and the x, the largest variable that divides evenly into x squared and x, and this works away with all variables, that is always the variable with the smallest exponent, and that's 1. So you don't see that 1 there, but it is x to the first. Okay, so, and again, just to recall, so the largest variable that divides evenly into x squared and x is x. If I had x to the 4th and then x to the 2nd, the largest variable that would divide evenly into x to the 4th and x to the 2nd would be x to the square, would be x squared. If I had x to the 10th and x to the 4th, the largest variable that would divide evenly into x to the 10th and x to the 4th is x to the 4th. All right, so the largest variable that divides evenly into x squared and x is x. Okay, so there, I found my greatest monomial factor. It's 2x. And then we figure out what's left over, so we write our parentheses. And then we take 2x squared and we divide that by 2x. Well, 2 divided by 2 is 1 times x squared divided by x is x. So that would just be x or 1x. And then, so we have our minus, and then 18 divided by 2 is 9. And then x divided by x is 1, so we have our 9 times 1. We have to subtract that. And there we go. It's factored. 2x squared minus 18x is equal to 2x times x minus 9. Okay? See, I told you. Factoring is the reverse of distributing or multiplying. To the opposite. And then we'll look at one more problem and we'll call it a day. The textbook makes it a point of wanting you to factor out a leading negative. So I'll show you what I mean. So here again we have a binomial. We have two terms and we want to factor that. So whenever you have a leading coefficient that's negative, you always want to factor out that negatives. Okay, that's step one. Always factor out that negative. So this is going to equal, then I'll factor out the negative, and so that will be what's left over, 3x squared. And then this would be a positive 15x. Follow the bouncing ball. Negative times 3x squared gives me my negative 3x squared, and a negative times a positive gives me my negative 15x. I factored out the negative. Right? Always factor out that negative. And then the next thing, now we can factor this binomial. So here I go. So I'll have, so there's my negative on the outside. And then let's see here. So let me give myself some more space here. Okay. Go down here. Okay, so here I need to factor that binomial. So what's the largest number you can divide evenly into 3 and 15 is 3. And then what about the largest x that goes into x squared and x? It's x. So there's my greatest binomial factor, 3x. And then well, let's see here what's left over then. So if I take 3x squared and divide it by 3x, I just get x. And then I have a plus. And if I take 15x and divide it by 3x, I get 5. Then we close our bracket there. All right, so, and again, you know, I had a student, she would always check her work. You know, she would say, well, 3x times x gives me what? 3x squared. Checks out. And then 3x times a positive 5 gives me 15x. And that checks out. And then we have our minus. Okay, so that's the overview of factoring. Again, I do question how much of this you get in Algebra 2. Boy, but this is, you guys will get inundated with this. I mean, in Algebra 1, you guys will get a lot of practice with this in Algebra 2. That is for sure. Okay, so there's today's lesson, and you'll have some homework.